Marcus Riley had what you might generously call the worst job in the galaxy. While passengers from 17 different star systems lounged in crystal pools filled with liquid starlight, Marcus crawled through maintenance shafts that smelled like a Gorgonian's armpit after a marathon. The Stellar Paradise wasn't just any cruise ship, it was the crown jewel of interstellar tourism, where the wealthy came to pretend they were cultured while complaining about the thread count in their silk bedsheets. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with the kind of self-important chatter that only comes from beings who've convinced themselves they run the universe. Floating in their various atmospheric bubbles, breathing apparatus and gravity fields, the representatives of 47 different species had gathered for what they considered a matter of utmost importance. And Marcus? Well, Marcus was the guy who cleaned up when those silk bedsheets got, let's say, violated by various alien digestive systems. Chancellor Blorth, a purple blob with too many eyes and an even bigger ego, slammed his ceremonial gavel against the crystalline podium. The sound echoed through translators, coming out as everything from musical chimes to aggressive clicking, depending on your species. Order. Order in the assembly. Blorth's voice gurgled through the universal translator with all the authority of a middle manager who'd just discovered someone was using the office coffee machine without contributing to the fund. Riley. Captain Vortak's voice crackled through the comm system, dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for expired milk. The Zephyrian ambassador's waste disposal unit is malfunctioning again. Handle it. Marcus sighed, adjusting his tool belt. Captain Vortak was a saurian-think iguana, but with delusions of grandeur and a uniform that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. The captain treated humans like living furniture, which was actually a step up from how Security Chief Grimnar saw them. Grimnar, a chitinoid with mandibles that could crack titanium, preferred to think of humans as particularly clever cockroaches. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed a sector map of the galaxy's outer rim, with one tiny red dot blinking ominously near the edge of civilized space. As you can see, Blorth continued, the humans have established an unauthorized presence in Sector 7 Alpha 12. This is clearly a violation of Galactic Ordinance 4892b, subsection 15, paragraph 847, which states that primitive species must request permission before establishing any permanent structures outside their designated quarantine zone. On my way, Captain, Marcus replied, knowing better than to show any attitude. He'd learned that lesson 3 months ago when he'd made the mistake of suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the aliens could try reading the maintenance manual before flooding their quarters with bioluminescent gel. A chittering voice from the insectoid delegation piped up. Surely you mean the amended version from Cycle 2847? Ordinance 4892b was superseded by the Primitive Species Containment Act. The corridor outside the Zephyrian suite reeked of sulfur and shame. Marcus knocked, then immediately regretted it when Ambassador Klix had opened the door. Zephyrians looked like someone had crossed a jellyfish with a tax auditor, and they had the charming habit of secreting acidic slime when embarrassed. Actually, interrupted Ambassador Krill Knox, whose species looked like someone had crossed a crab with a filing cabinet. I believe you're referring to the Primitive Species Management Protocol, which replaced the Containment Act after the Zorblex incident. Ah, the maintenance creature, Klix gurgled. The waste processor appears to have achieved sentience, and is refusing to process my excretions. Blorth's eyes rotated in what could charitably be called annoyance. The specific ordinance number is irrelevant. The point is, these monkeys have no business setting up shop in our territory. Marcus resisted the urge to point out that maybe eating nothing but fermented plasma worms wasn't the best dietary choice. Instead, he smiled that special customer service smile that said, I'm dead inside but still professionally obligated to help you. From the back of the chamber, a deep, rumbling voice cut through the bureaucratic noise like a plasma cannon through tissue paper. With respect, Chancellor, perhaps we're overcomplicating this situation. 20 minutes later, covered in alien waste and questioning his life choices, Marcus emerged from the Zephyrian's bathroom. The waste processor hadn't achieved sentience, it had just been clogged with what appeared to be the remnants of Klix's attempt to flush down a decorative plant. All eyes, sensors, and assorted visual organs turned toward Admiral Vex Tar of the Draconian Empire. If Central Casting had been looking for someone to play intimidating Space Lizard #1, Vextar would have gotten the part without an audition. 8 feet tall, covered in scales that seemed to absorb light, and sporting enough battle scars to tell a dozen war stories, he was the kind of being that made other species check their insurance policies. "Excellent work, creature," Klixit said, already turning away. "Do try not to contaminate anything else on your way out." "Admiral Vextar," Blorth acknowledged with the tone of someone who really wished they were talking to anyone else. "You have something to contribute?" Marcus trudged back to the maintenance bay, where he found Chief Grimnar waiting with the kind of expression that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. The Chidnoid's compound eyes focused on Marcus with predatory intensity. Riley, Grimnar clicked, his mandibles scraping together like nails on a chalkboard. "The artificial gravity generator in Deck 7 is fluctuating. Fix it before the Arcturian chess tournament. If those pretentious gas bags start floating around during their game, they'll complain to management." Vextar's laugh sounded like rocks being crushed in a cement mixer. "Contribute?" "Chancellor, I'm offering to solve your problem entirely. These humans have one small research station, correct? No military presence, no defensive capabilities, probably just a handful of scientists poking at rocks and taking pictures of stars." "Right away, Chief," Marcus said, grabbing his gravity wrench. The gravity generator was a temperamental beast that required the mechanical equivalent of therapy to keep running. It also weighed about 300 pounds, which meant Marcus would need to disassemble it piece by piece by piece, something that typically took the better part of a day. The holographic display zoomed in on the human outpost. It looked exactly like what you'd expect from a budget research facility. A collection of prefabricated modules connected by covered walkways, a few communication arrays, and what appeared to be a landing pad that had seen better days. As he made his way to Deck 7, Marcus passed the ship's gym, where a group of Xylorian tourists were laughing at something on their portable screens. The Xylorians looked like purple tree branches that had decided to start a boy band, and they had the collective maturity of middle schoolers. "My armada is currently conducting training exercises in the Rigel system," Vextar continued, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never met a problem he couldn't solve with superior firepower. 200 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts and my flagship, the Stellar Dominance. We could be at this human outpost within 48 standard hours. "Look at this pathetic creature," one of them wheezed, showing the screen to his friends. "It can barely lift the standard plasma rifle." The chamber fell silent except for the various mechanical sounds of life support systems and the occasional diplomatic cough. The screen showed yesterday's mandatory combat training, where Marcus had indeed struggled with the plasma rifle. In his defense, the thing weighed more than a small moon, and had been designed for beings with 4 arms and natural exoskeletons. "You're suggesting military action against a research station?" asked Ambassador Trillpack, whose species had evolved from something that looked like a cross between a flower and a nervous system. "Isn't that somewhat excessive?" Marcus kept walking, pretending he hadn't heard. He'd gotten used to being the ship's comedic relief, the walking punchline that made everyone else feel superior. The thing was, Marcus had actually read the technical manuals, all of them. While his alien crewmates were busy feeling superior, Marcus had memorized every system, every shortcut, every design flaw that the ship's engineers had tried to hide. Vextar's tail, which had been slowly swishing behind him, suddenly went rigid. "Excessive? Ambassador, these primitives have violated galactic law. They've ignored our sovereignty and established an unauthorized presence in our territory. If we allow this to stand, every upstart species with a rocket and a dream will think they can do whatever they please. But who cared about that when you couldn't bench press a plasma cannon, right?" He gestured toward the holographic display with one clawed hand. "Besides, look at it. It's clearly a scouting operation. Today it's a research station, tomorrow it's a military outpost, and next thing you know, they're claiming mineral rights to half the sector." Chancellor Blorth's eyes swiveled as he considered the proposal. On one hand, sending a military armada to deal with a research station seemed like using a photon torpedo to kill a space fly. On the other hand, the humans had been getting increasingly uppity lately, and a show of force might be exactly what the galaxy needed to remind everyone who was really in charge. Part 2, When Everything Goes Sideways. Marcus was 3 bolts deep into the gravity generator when the ship shuddered like it had been punched by an angry god. The lights flickered, emergency klaxons started wailing, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear Captain Vortak's voice over the intercom, that speaking in the universal language of panic. "Very well," Blorth announced, his voice carrying the weight of bureaucratic inevitability. "Admiral Vextar, you are hereby authorized to proceed to the human outpost and demand their immediate withdrawal from Galactic Council territory. If they refuse..." He paused dramatically. "You are authorized to use whatever force you deem necessary to remove them." All passengers remain calm. This is merely a minor technical. Vextar's grin revealed rows of teeth that evolution had clearly designed for serious violence. "It will be my pleasure, Chancellor. I estimate this will take approximately 6 hours from arrival to complete resolution." As the various delegates began discussing the finer points of interspecies incident reports and territorial violation protocols, Admiral Vextar was already mentally composing his victory speech. After all, how hard could it be to intimidate a few human scientists? The intercom cut off with a wet gurgling sound that suggested Vortak's day had just gotten significantly worse. Marcus peeked out of the maintenance access panel just in time to see armed figures storming down the corridor. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from having significantly more firepower than anyone else in the immediate vicinity. The leader was a nightmare of cybernetic implants and bad attitude, Captain Scar of the infamous Dread Fleet. Research Station Echo 7 sat in the void like a collection of tin cans that someone had welded together during a particularly optimistic weekend project. Solar panels that had seen better decades caught what little starlight filtered through the dust clouds, while communication arrays that looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts pointed hopefully toward Earth. Inside the station's maintenance section, Jake Murphy was having what could generously be called a philosophical discussion with a coffee machine. Scar looked like someone had decided to see how many mechanical parts they could graft onto a Krillian battle toad before it stopped being technically alive. His left arm was a plasma cannon, his right eye was a targeting computer, and his personality was apparently installed by someone with a very dark sense of humor. "Attention, meat sacks." Scar's voice boomed through his external speakers. "You are now the property of the Dread Fleet. Resist and we'll use you for target practice. Comply and we'll use you for ransom. Everyone wins." "Look, you piece of overpriced space junk," Jake muttered, elbow deep in the machine's inner workings. "All I want is one cup of coffee that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a gym sock. Is that too much to ask?" Marcus did what any reasonable person would do when faced with cybernetic pirates. He quietly closed the maintenance panel and tried to become one with the wall. Through the ventilation grate, he watched the galaxy's most superior beings surrender faster than tourists abandoning a sinking cruise ship. The coffee machine, being an inanimate object, chose not to respond. This was probably wise, as Jake had a reputation for creative problem-solving that occasionally involved percussive maintenance. Captain Vortak, who normally strutted around like he owned the universe, was now on his knees with his hands behind his head, making whimpering sounds that would have been embarrassing for a hatchling. Security Chief Grimnar, the same chitinoid who regularly threatened to use Marcus as insect food, had apparently fainted and was being dragged away by pirates who looked distinctly unimpressed. Jake Murphy looked exactly like what you'd get if you crossed a middle-aged mechanic with someone who'd given up caring about dress codes sometime around the Clinton administration. His hair was the kind of brown that had long ago made peace with gray, his jumpsuit had enough patches to qualify as a quilt, and his expression suggested he'd seen enough of the universe's nonsense to last several lifetimes. The proximity alarm chose that moment to start its obnoxious beeping, which sounded like a smoke detector having an anxiety attack. "Where are your security protocols now?" One of the pirates laughed, kicking Grimnar's unconscious form. A bunch of pampered tourists pretending to be tough. "Oh, come on," Jake sighed, wiping his hands on a rag that had probably been white sometime during the previous century. "What now? What now?" The Arcturian chess players, those intellectually superior gas beings, were literally deflating with terror. The Zephyrian ambassador was secreting so much stress slime that the pirates had to wear hazmat suits just to get near him. And the Azylorian tourists who'd been mocking Marcus an hour ago? They were crying. Actual tears. From beings who claimed humans were too emotional to be taken seriously. He shuffled over to the main console, which displayed the kind of user interface that made you nostalgic for Windows 95. A red blinking dot had appeared on the edge of the sensor range, accompanied by text that simply read, "Multiple large objects detected. Classification, unknown." Marcus watched from his hiding spot as the pirates efficiently rounded up everyone they could find. Their operation was smooth, professional, and absolutely terrifying. Within 30 minutes, they had control of the bridge, the engine room, and every major system on the ship. Jake squinted at the screen, then picked up the coffee-stained manual that sat next to the console. After flipping through several pages of warnings about not using the microwave to dry wet clothing, he found the section he was looking for. Well, almost every system. As Marcus listened to the pirates coordinate their operation, he realized something important. They had no idea he existed. In their tactical assessment, they'd accounted for the crew, the security forces, and the VIP passengers. But the maintenance staff? The lowly humans who crawled through the walls fixing things? They might as well have been invisible. Multiple large objects, he read aloud, could indicate asteroid field, space debris, or hostile fleet. He looked back at the screen, where the single red dot had now become approximately 200 red dots. Yeah, that's probably not asteroids. The communication system crackled to life with the kind of static that suggested someone was trying very hard to reach him from very far away. Which, Marcus reflected, might just be the first lucky break he'd had in months. Echo 7, this is Earth Command. Do you copy? Echo 7, please respond immediately. He carefully crawled deeper into the maintenance shaft, making his way toward the engineering section. If he was going to figure out what these pirates wanted, he needed access to the ship's communication logs. And if he was going to do anything about it, he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with. Jake reached over and hit the transmit button with the enthusiasm of someone answering a telemarketing call during dinner. Yeah, this is Echo 7. What's up, Earth Command? The maintenance tunnels were Marcus's domain. He knew every pipe, every cable, every shortcut that the ship's designers had never bothered to document. While the pirates were busy congratulating themselves on their easy victory, Marcus was moving through the ship's skeleton like a ghost. From the engineering station, hidden behind a false panel that only maintenance staff knew about, Marcus accessed the ship's communication array. What he found made his blood run cold. Jake, thank God, we're showing a massive fleet heading your way. Are you seeing this on your sensors? Jake glanced back at the screen, where the red dots had organized themselves into what looked suspiciously like an attack formation. Yep, got about 200 contacts heading this way. Pretty impressive light show, actually. The pirates weren't just after ransom money. They were working for someone called the Hegemony, and they had very specific orders: capture the VIPs, strip the ship for parts, and eliminate any witnesses, especially the human witnesses. Apparently, humans were considered a contamination that needed to be cleansed from the galaxy. There was a pause that lasted long enough for Jake to wonder if the transmission had cut out. When Earth Command came back online, the voice had climbed about 3 octaves. Marcus stared at the orders on his screen, feeling something cold and angry settling in his stomach. He'd spent months being treated like garbage, being mocked and dismissed by beings who considered themselves his superiors. And now those same beings wanted him dead just for existing. 200? Jake, that's not a patrol. That's an invasion fleet. You need to evacuate immediately. Jake replied, popping open a can of soda that had been sitting on his desk since approximately the Mesozoic era. I'm kind of in the middle of something here. This coffee machine is being particularly stubborn today. Well, Marcus thought, cracking his knuckles, that was going to be a problem. Because while everyone else saw a weak, pathetic maintenance worker, Marcus saw something entirely different. A ghost in the machine with access to every system on the ship, intimate knowledge of every vulnerability, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Jake, listen to me very carefully. You are about to be visited by what appears to be the entire Draconian battle fleet. This is not a drill. This is not a training exercise, and this is definitely not the time to worry about coffee. Time to show these superior beings what a contamination could really do. Jake took a sip of his ancient soda and made a face. You know, for a species that supposedly conquered half the galaxy, you'd think they'd have better timing. I just got the artificial gravity working in Section C, and if I leave now, it'll probably break again. Marcus started small, because the best chaos always begins with seemingly innocent changes. His first target was the pirates' temporary command post in the main dining hall, a choice that showed they had absolutely no idea what they were dealing with. Jake. The voice from Earth Command had now reached frequencies that were probably causing dogs to howl in nearby solar systems. "This is Admiral Harrison. Do you remember me? We served together on the Titan project." The Stellar Paradise's waste management system was a marvel of engineering, capable of processing the biological output of 17 different species without creating interdimensional incidents. It was also, Marcus knew from intimate experience, connected to every major system on the ship through a network of maintenance tunnels that the original designers had somehow forgotten to mention in the blueprints. Jake's expression shifted slightly, like someone who just remembered where they left their car keys. "Oh, hey, Admiral. Yeah, I remember you. You still worried about everything? Or have you learned to relax in your old age?" 20 minutes after Marcus rerouted the waste disposal system, the pirates' command post was knee-deep in a cocktail of alien sewage that included Zephyrian stress slime, chitinoid molting fluid, and something from the Arcturian delegation that was technically classified as a biohazard. "Relaxed? Jake, there's a fleet of warships heading your way that could turn your station into component atoms, and you're talking about coffee machines. What in the seven hells is this?" Scar roared, his mechanical leg servos whining as he tried to wade through the mess. "Admiral, with all due respect, I've been maintaining this tin can for 3 years. I've dealt with life support failures, reactor meltdowns, a plague of space mice that somehow learned to use tools, and a food processor that achieved sentience and demanded voting rights. A bunch of cranky lizards and spaceships doesn't even crack my top 10 list of problems." His lieutenant, a scarred Vorgoth with more tattoos than brain cells, was gagging behind his helmet. "Sir, it appears to be some kind of waste overflow. We can't locate the source." Marcus, watching through a ventilation grate, allowed himself a small smile. The source was currently a creative rerouting of 17 different waste systems, 3 backup overflow pipes, and the ship's emergency bilge pumps. Fixing it would require someone with maintenance access, intimate knowledge of the ship's design, and about 6 hours of very unpleasant work. The sensor array chose that moment to beep again, indicating the approaching fleet had moved from distant concern to immediate neighborhood. But that was just the opening act. Jake glanced at the display and nodded approvingly. "Actually, I take that back. They've got some nice ships, very symmetrical formation. You don't see craftsmanship like that anymore." For his next trick, Marcus tackled the food synthesizers. The pirates, being practical sorts, had planned to use the ship's replicators to feed themselves during the operation. What they hadn't planned for was someone with administrative access reprogramming every food synthesizer to produce nothing but military surplus rations from the galactic war. "Jake, Nalendo." Admiral Harrison's voice had now taken on the tone of someone trying to talk a cat down from a very tall tree. "I need you to understand something. The reason you're the only person on that station is because everyone else evacuated when we detected the fleet. You were supposed to leave with them. Specifically Krillian combat rations, which were famous throughout the galaxy for tasting like recycled boot leather and having the nutritional value of cardboard. The pirates discovered this when they tried to order lunch and instead received what appeared to be compressed suffering in vacuum-sealed packages." "Yeah, about that," Jake replied, pulling out a work order that looked like it had been through a paper shredder and then reassembled by someone with very poor eyesight. "Dr. Peterson left me a list of things to fix before I locked up. 17 items, and I'm only up to number 3. You know how I feel about leaving a job half-finished." The proximity alarm's beeping had now reached a frequency that suggested the approaching fleet was close enough to count individual ships without using telescopes. "These taste like death," one pirate complained, trying to choke down what was supposed to be beef but looked suspiciously like industrial paste. "At least it's not purple," another replied, staring at his ration pack with the kind of expression normally reserved for funeral services. "Besides," Jake added, "someone's got to be here to meet our visitors. It would be rude to just leave them hanging out there in space." The bridge of the stellar dominance was everything you'd expect from a ship designed by a species that believed intimidation was the highest form of diplomacy. Dark metal surfaces reflected red lighting that pulsed in time with the ship's heartbeat like power systems, while holographic displays showed tactical information in colors that suggested violence was not just an option, but a preferred solution. While the pirates were discovering the joys of military cuisine, Marcus was getting creative with the artificial gravity system. The stellar paradise used localized gravity generators throughout the ship, each one capable of independent adjustment. With a few careful modifications, Marcus created what he liked to think of as gravity wells, areas where the artificial gravity was just strong enough to make walking feel like trudging through thick mud. Admiral Vextar stood at the center of it all, his clawed hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the approaching human outpost through the main viewer. His bridge crew, a collection of Draconians who looked like they'd been recruited from a particularly aggressive rugby team, worked at their stations with the efficient brutality that had made their species the galaxy's go-to choice for hostile takeovers. The pirates found these wells randomly distributed throughout the ship, turning simple navigation into an exhausting ordeal. Watching cybernetically enhanced soldiers struggle to lift their feet like they were walking through peanut butter was surprisingly therapeutic. Admiral reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kreshtar, "We are within optimal intimidation range of the human facility." But Marcus's masterpiece was the entertainment system. The Stellar Paradise's sound system was designed to provide ambient music throughout the ship, creating the perfect atmosphere for relaxation and luxury. With a few adjustments to the playlist algorithm, Marcus transformed it into a weapon of psychological warfare. Vextar's tail swished with satisfaction. "Excellent. Open a channel to the outpost. Let's see how quickly these primitives can grovel." Every speaker on the ship began blasting Galaxy's Greatest Hits Volume 847, featuring such classics as the Centaurian Death Wail, the Vulpine Mating Song, and something called My Heart Belongs to Daddy, But My Tentacles Belong to You, that had somehow become popular in 3 different star systems. The main viewer shifted to show the exterior of Research Station Echo 7, which looked even less impressive up close. Someone had apparently tried to paint racing stripes on one of the habitat modules, and there was what appeared to be a small garden growing in one of the observation domes. "Channel open, Admiral," reported the communications officer. The volume was just loud enough to be impossible to ignore, but not quite loud enough to justify the effort of hunting down every speaker. And every time the pirates thought they'd found the source, the music would shift to a different section of the ship. "Make it stop." One pirate screamed, clawing at his helmet as a particularly enthusiastic Draconian opera singer hit notes that could shatter glass. Vextar drew himself up to his full, impressive height, spread his arms in a gesture calculated to display maximum menace, and activated his most intimidating voice. "Attention, human facility. I am Admiral Vextar of the Draconian Imperial Navy, commanding a fleet of 200 warships. You have violated Galactic Council territory and must surrender immediately." The response came almost immediately, but it wasn't quite what anyone on the bridge had expected. "We can't find the control system," another replied. "It's like the ship is playing music by itself. Please hold while I connect you to the next available representative. Your call is important to us." Scar's cybernetic eye was twitching, which Marcus took as a good sign. The pirate captain was standing in the middle of the dining hall, ankle-deep in alien waste, choking down military rations, struggling against inconsistent gravity, and listening to what sounded like a mating call between 2 particularly romantic garbage disposals. "Find whoever's doing this," Scar growled through gritted teeth. "I want them brought to me alive so I can kill them slowly." Vextar's expression went through several rapid changes as his brain tried to process what he'd just heard. What did they just say? "I believe, Admiral," said Lieutenant Kreshtar, consulting his translation matrix, "they have placed us in a waiting queue." Marcus, comfortably hidden in his maintenance shaft, made a note to add some creative modifications to the air conditioning system next. After all, if you're going to wage guerrilla warfare against cybernetic pirates, you might as well make it interesting. Soft music began playing over the communication channel. It sounded like the kind of jazz that gets played in elevators when they want you to feel sophisticated about being trapped in a small metal box. The beauty of it all was that none of Marcus's sabotage was technically violent. He wasn't shooting anyone or blowing anything up. He was just making minor adjustments to systems that were already in place, using his intimate knowledge of the ship against enemies who saw him as beneath notice. The pirates were trained for conventional warfare, for enemies who would meet them with guns and explosives and direct confrontation. They had absolutely no idea how to fight someone who weaponized room service and elevator music. They put us on hold, Vextar said slowly, as if saying it out loud might make it make more sense. They put the draconian Imperial Navy on hold, and Marcus was just getting started. The music continued for another 30 seconds before a human voice came back on the line. By hour 6 of the siege, Captain Scar had developed what could generously be called a twitch. His cybernetic eye was flickering erratically, his plasma arm was sparking, and he'd started talking to himself in 3 different languages, none of them particularly flattering. "Thank you for holding. This is Jake. Before we get started, can I just confirm that you're not calling about your starship's extended warranty? Because I've got to tell you, we get a lot of those calls. And honestly, most of those warranty programs are complete scams." Lieutenant Kresh Tar looked at his admiral with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been turned inside out and shaken vigorously. "Sir, I don't think he realizes we're here to conquer his station." Marcus, meanwhile, had escalated his campaign of creative chaos to an art form. "Human." Vextar roared, loud enough to make several bridge officers wince. "I am not calling about a warranty. I am Admiral Vextar. I command 200 warships. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences." The ship's medical bay had been transformed into a maze of sleeping gas dispensers, triggered by motion sensors that Marcus had creatively reprogrammed. Any pirate unlucky enough to enter looking for medical supplies would find themselves taking an involuntary nap courtesy of the same anesthetic gas used for Zephyrian dental procedures. The gas was harmless but effective, and had the added bonus of causing temporary memory loss and an irresistible urge to sing lullabies. There was a brief pause, during which the bridge crew could hear what sounded like someone taking a sip of something. "Why are my men coming back from medical singing nursery rhymes?" Scar demanded of his lieutenant, who was currently humming something about a 3-headed space cow. "I don't know, sir," the lieutenant replied dreamily. "But doesn't everything just feel so peaceful? 200 warships, huh? That's actually pretty impressive. Most folks only call with complaints about 1 or 2 ships. What seems to be the problem with yours?" "Problem?" Vextar's voice had reached levels that were probably violating several noise ordinances. "The only problem is that you're about to become a cloud of superheated plasma." Scar's response was lost in a burst of mechanical grinding as his cybernetic jaw malfunctioned, possibly from stress, possibly from the subtle electromagnetic interference that Marcus had introduced to the ship's power grid. Nothing major, just enough to make sensitive electronics behave unpredictably. But Marcus's real breakthrough came when he intercepted a communication between Scar and his mysterious employers. Hidden in the ship's communication relay, Marcus listened with growing anger as the truth finally came out. Okay, no need to shout. I can hear you just fine. Look, Mr. Vextar, was it? I appreciate you taking the time to call, but I'm actually pretty busy right now. I've got a coffee machine that's refusing to cooperate, a gravity generator that keeps playing classical music for some reason, and somebody apparently thought it was funny to reprogram the bathroom door to only open for knock-knock jokes. The Draconian bridge crew exchanged glances that suggested they were beginning to question their career choices. The Hegemony wasn't just another galactic empire looking to expand their territory. They were purists, convinced that the galaxy's superior species were being contaminated by contact with lesser races. And humans, apparently, were at the top of their extermination list. So if you want to schedule an appointment to discuss your fleet's issues, I've got some time open next Thursday around 2 o'clock. Assuming we're talking standard galactic time, and not that weird Rigelian calendar system that nobody understands. The specimens have been secured, Scar reported to a voice that sounded like gravel being processed through a meat grinder. We'll complete the cleansing once we've extracted maximum value from the ship. Excellent, the voice replied. The Hegemony's vision of purity will soon be realized, beginning with the eradication of the human contamination. Vextar stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, as his brain tried to process the fact that he was apparently being scheduled like a dental appointment. Admiral, whispered his sensor officer, I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from the station. Marcus felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. These weren't just pirates looking for a quick score. They were executioners, and every human on the ship, including him, was marked for death. "Define unusual," Vextar managed to say without taking his eyes off the view screen. "It's time to stop playing games." Marcus's next move was to weaponize the ship's service robots. The Stellar Paradise employed hundreds of maintenance bots, cleaning units, and service drones, all connected to a central AI system that Marcus had administrative access to. With a few creative modifications to their programming, Marcus turned the ship's helpful staff into an army of persistently annoying attackers. "Well, sir, according to our scans, their power output is approximately 10 times what it should be for a facility of that size. Also, I'm reading what appears to be a significant gravitational anomaly in their waste processing section." On the communication channel, Jake's voice continued cheerfully. "You know what, Mr. Vextar, you seem like a nice enough guy, despite the whole turning people into plasma thing. Tell you what, why don't you and your fleet just hang out there for a few minutes while I finish up with this coffee machine? Then we can have a proper chat about whatever's bothering you." The cleaning bots began following pirates around, spraying them with industrial-strength decontaminant and lecturing them about proper hygiene. The service drones started helpfully rearranging their equipment, always managing to misplace weapons just when they were needed most. And the maintenance bots developed an obsession with fixing the pirates' cybernetic implants, often in the middle of the night. "Get these things away from me," one pirate screamed as a cleaning bot tried to polish his armor while he was still wearing it. "Human," Vextar said, his voice now carrying the tone of someone who was beginning to suspect the universe was playing an elaborate practical joke on him. "Do you understand that I can destroy your entire station with a single command?" "Oh sure, I get that a lot. But here's the thing, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but I'm having kind of a busy day. So unless your fleet is on fire or something, you're just going to have to wait your turn like everyone else." "They're just trying to help," another pirate replied, batting away a service drone that was attempting to style his hair. But Marcus's masterstroke was the communication dead zone. Using his knowledge of the ship's electromagnetic systems, he created a field of interference that made it impossible for the pirates to contact their backup ships or coordinate with their ground teams. The Stellar Paradise had effectively vanished from the galactic communication grid. The line went silent except for the sound of what appeared to be someone banging on metal with a wrench. "Sir," said the sensor officer, his voice carrying the kind of concern usually reserved for discovering that your house is on fire and the fire department is on strike, "those energy readings are increasing. Whatever they're doing over there, it's drawing a lot of power." Scar didn't realize what had happened until he tried to call for reinforcements and got nothing but static. Vextar stared at the human outpost, which continued to look like exactly the kind of ramshackle research facility that should have surrendered immediately upon seeing his fleet. Instead, it was apparently putting him on hold while someone fixed a coffee machine. "What do you mean we're cut off?" he roared at his communications officer, a nervous Glarvian who was rapidly regretting his career choices. "Lieutenant Kresh Tar," he said slowly, "in your military experience, is this normal behavior for a species that's about to be conquered?" "Sir, all our communications are being jammed. Internal comms are working, but we can't reach the fleet." "No, sir," Kresh Tar replied. "Most species either surrender immediately or start shooting. I've never seen anyone try to schedule us, then fix it." "Sir, we've tried. The interference appears to be coming from the ship itself, but we can't locate the source." The communication channel crackled back to life. "Okay, good news and bad news. Good news is I think I figured out what's wrong with the coffee machine. Bad news is it's going to take me another few minutes to fix it. You guys mind waiting a bit longer?" Admiral Vextar had reached that special point in a military commander's career where the universe stops making sense, and you start questioning whether you should have listened to your mother and become an accountant instead. His fleet of 200 warships sat in perfect formation around a human research station, whose lone occupant had just asked them to wait while he fixed his coffee machine. Marcus smiled from his hiding spot in the communication relay. The source was everywhere and nowhere, a carefully orchestrated symphony of electromagnetic chaos that would take a team of engineers weeks to unravel. The pirates were now truly alone, cut off from backup, surrounded by hostile systems, and facing an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't understand. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kreshtar said carefully. Perhaps we should simply open fire and end this charade. For the first time since the attack began, Marcus felt like he might actually have a chance. That's when he decided to start rescuing hostages. Vextar considered this for a moment. It would certainly be simpler than trying to figure out why a primitive human was treating the draconian Imperial Navy like a customer service inquiry. But something about those unusual energy readings was bothering him. His first target was Chief Grimnar, partly because the Cheetanoid knew the ship's security systems, but mostly because Marcus wanted to see the look on his face when the weak human came to his rescue. "Human," he called over the communication channel. "Your time is up. Surrender now or face immediate destruction." Grimnar was being held in the VIP lounge, guarded by two pirates who were currently dealing with a cleaning bot that had become obsessed with the dirt under their fingernails. Marcus used the opportunity to slip in through the service entrance and wake the unconscious security chief. Jake's voice came back with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. "You know what, Mr. Vextar? I appreciate your patience, but I'm starting to think you're not really interested in scheduling an appointment. Are you maybe here for something else?" "Riley?" Grimnar's compound eyes focused on Marcus with confusion. "What are you doing here?" "Yes. I am here for your unconditional surrender." "Ah, gotcha. Well, that's going to be a problem, because I'm actually not authorized to surrender anything. I'm just the maintenance guy. Dr. Peterson, she's the one in charge, but she's back on Earth at a conference about xenogeology or something equally exciting." "Rescuing you, apparently," Marcus replied, cutting the Chitanoid's restraints. "Try to keep up." As they made their way through the maintenance tunnels, Grimnar kept staring at Marcus like he'd grown a second head. Vextar's tail lashed in frustration. "Then who is authorized to surrender this facility?" "Aiden, that's a good question. Probably need to check the manual for that one." There was the sound of pages rustling. "Let's see. Emergency protocols, evacuation procedures, coffee machine warranty information. Ah, here we go. Facility surrender authorization. Says here that in the absence of the commanding officer, facility surrender can only be authorized by, oh, this is awkward." "You did all this?" the security chief asked, gesturing at the chaos around them. "Turns out being underestimated has its advantages," Marcus replied. "Who knew?" What? By the time Marcus had rescued half a dozen hostages, Captain Scar had stopped being annoyed and started being genuinely frightened. His cybernetic eye was cycling through threat assessment protocols that had never been designed to handle an enemy who attacked with weaponized housekeeping and strategic playlist management. It says it can only be authorized by someone with a Class 7 security clearance or higher. And, well, I'm just maintenance. I've got a Class 2 clearance, which basically means I can fix toilets and operate the coffee machine. Well, when it's working anyway. Find him. Scar screamed at his remaining crew, his plasma arm charging with barely contained energy. "I don't care if you have to tear this ship apart bolt by bolt. Find the human." On the bridge of the Stellar Dominance, several officers were beginning to develop the kind of headaches usually associated with trying to understand tax law. The problem was, Marcus had stopped hiding. He was hunting. "Nah. This is ridiculous." Vextar roared. "I don't care about your bureaucracy. Surrender or be destroyed." "Look, Mr. Vextar, I understand you're frustrated, but I can't just ignore proper procedure. What if Dr. Peterson came back and found out I'd surrendered the station without authorization? I'd probably lose my coffee privileges. The ship had become his domain, every system bent to his will, every corridor a potential trap. He'd turned the artificial gravity into a weapon, creating zones where pirates would suddenly find themselves pressed to the floor by 3 times normal gravity. He'd rewired the automatic doors to respond only to his biosignature, meaning pirates would find themselves locked out of sections of the ship they desperately needed to access. And then there were the more creative measures. Your coffee privileges? Marcus had discovered that the ship's sonic shower systems could be recalibrated to produce frequencies that interfered with cybernetic implants. Pirates would enter what they thought was a bathroom and emerge with their mechanical parts malfunctioning in increasingly creative ways. "Oh yeah, good coffee is hard to come by out here. Most of the stuff we get tastes like it was made from recycled boot leather." Speaking of which, the sound of machinery humming came over the channel. There we go. Finally got this piece of junk working again. One pirate's targeting computer started displaying only pictures of kittens. Another found his weapon arm would only activate when he said please and thank you. A third discovered that his cybernetic legs had been reprogrammed to dance whenever they detected music which, thanks to Marcus's ongoing playlist of galactic hits, was constantly. Vextar was beginning to understand why his species had never bothered trying to negotiate with humans before. They were clearly insane. Fine, he said, making what he assumed would be his final attempt at diplomacy. If you cannot surrender, then I will simply have to remove you by force. Prepare to be boarded. This is humiliating, the dancing pirate complained as his legs forced him into what appeared to be a traditional Regelian courting dance. At least your arm still works, replied the polite pirate, whose weapon kept powering down whenever he forgot his manners. Oh well, if you're planning to come aboard, I should probably mention that we're in the middle of some routine maintenance. Things might get a little messy. Marcus picked them off one by one, not with violence, but with the kind of creative problem-solving that came from years of fixing things that weren't supposed to break. Each capture was a small masterpiece of engineering and psychology, designed not just to neutralize threats but to completely demoralize the remaining pirates. What kind of maintenance? Jake's voice took on the tone of someone reading from a checklist. Let's see, I've got the garbage disposal system running a full cleaning cycle, the pest control drones are doing their weekly patrol, and I think the automatic sprinkler system is due for a test. You might want to reschedule for next week. The rescued hostages, meanwhile, were seeing Marcus and, by extension, humanity in an entirely new light. Admiral, the sensor officer called out, his voice tight with concern. I'm reading massive energy spikes from multiple sections of the station. Whatever they're doing over there, it's drawing enormous amounts of power. I owe you an apology, Captain Vortak admitted as Marcus led him through a maintenance shaft that somehow connected the detention area to the secure communications room. I may have underestimated your species. May have? Marcus replied dryly. Captain, you once made me clean your quarters with a toothbrush because you said humans needed to understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Tar gestured dismissively. It's a research station. They're probably running some primitive experiments. The first sign that this assessment might be incorrect came when one of his scout ships, which had moved in for a closer look at the station, simply vanished. Vortak had the grace to look embarrassed. Yes, well, perhaps the cosmic hierarchy is more flexible than I previously believed. Ambassador Clixit was even more direct. Marcus, I formally request that you consider accepting a position as my personal security consultant. Your tactical abilities are extraordinary. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Vanished, as if it had never existed at all. I'll think about it, Marcus said, leading the group toward the armory. Right after we deal with the cybernetic nightmare who wants to exterminate my entire species. What just happened to Scout 7? Vextar demanded. His tactical officer stared at his instruments with the expression of someone whose reality had just been thoroughly violated. Sir, according to sensors, Scout 7 encountered some kind of gravitational anomaly near the station's waste processing facility. The ship appears to have been compressed. The final confrontation came, as these things often do, in the ship's reactor core. Scar had barricaded himself there with his last remaining followers, thinking he could hold the ship's power systems hostage. What he didn't realize was that Marcus knew every backup system, every emergency protocol, every fail-safe that the engineers had built into the ship. Come out, human, Scar called, his voice echoing through the reactor chamber. Face me like a warrior. Compressed? Nah, into a point approximately the size of a marble, sir. Marcus emerged from behind a control panel, carrying nothing but his toolkit and wearing his maintenance uniform. He looked exactly like what he was, a scrawny human technician who should have been completely outmatched by a cybernetic killing machine. Jake's voice came over the communication channel, sounding mildly apologetic. Sorry about that, folks. Forgot to mention that the garbage disposal creates a small temporal vortex when it's running. Tends to suck in anything that gets too close. Usually just space debris, but I guess your ship was small enough to get caught in the field. Scar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. This is what's been causing me so much trouble? A pathetic maintenance worker with a wrench? Just a maintenance worker, Marcus agreed, pulling out his sonic screwdriver. But this pathetic maintenance worker knows something you don't. You destroyed one of my ships with a garbage disposal? And what's that? Well, destroyed is kind of a strong word. It's more like it got really compressed. The matter's still there, technically, just in a much more compact form. Before Vextar could respond to this information, alerts began sounding throughout his flagship as more ships reported contact with what appeared to be small, fast-moving objects. Marcus smiled, the expression sharp as broken glass. Every system on this ship has a warranty void if removed sticker. And you just voided yours. Admiral called his weapons officer. We're being attacked by, I'm not sure what to call them. They appear to be small automated units, but they're slicing through our hull plating like it's made of tissue paper. The sonic screwdriver, designed for calibrating sensitive equipment, turned out to be remarkably effective at disrupting cybernetic implants when used at the right frequency. Scar's targeting system went haywire. His plasma arm began charging and discharging randomly, and his cybernetic legs locked up completely. Jake's voice remained conversationally cheerful. Oh, those are just the pest control drones. They're designed to eliminate any unwanted biological contaminants that might threaten the station's ecosystem. Don't take it personally, they're just doing their job. What did you do to me? Scar demanded, trying to move and failing spectacularly. Pest control? Vextar watched on his tactical display as dozens of his smaller ships began reporting hull breaches from what appeared to be a swarm of maintenance robots. You're attacking my fleet with pest control drones? System diagnostic, Marcus replied, consulting his handheld scanner. Looks like you're suffering from multiple hardware failures, software conflicts, and what my readout is calling catastrophic user error. I'd recommend seeing a qualified technician, but I'm a little busy right now. Attack is such an ugly word. Think of it more as aggressive cleaning. Scar's last words before his cybernetic systems shut down completely were lost in a burst of static and what sounded suspiciously like dial-up internet sounds. Marcus looked around at the defeated pirates, the grateful hostages, and the ship he'd single-handedly defended with nothing but maintenance tools and creative thinking. The bridge shook as something impacted the stellar dominance's shields. Through the viewports, Vextar could see streams of what looked like water hitting his ships. Anyone know how to contact galactic security? He asked. I think we're going to need someone to come pick up the garbage. Sir, reported his defensive systems officer. We're being hit by some kind of liquid projectiles. Temperature readings indicate it's superheated to approximately 15,000 degrees. That's just the sprinkler system, Jake explained helpfully. It's designed to put out fires, but I may have set the temperature a little high. Safety first, you know. Can't be too careful when dealing with potential fire hazards. 3 weeks later, Marcus Riley found himself in the single most uncomfortable situation of his life, being treated with respect by people who used to consider him furniture. Admiral Vextar watched as his mighty fleet, which had successfully conquered 17 star systems and defeated the combined navies of 3 different species, was being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be household appliances. The Galactic News Network had picked up the story and run with it like a pack of journalists who discovered that ratings gold was hiding in a maintenance shaft. Human janitor defeats entire pirate fleet with household appliances, was the headline that had made Marcus briefly famous across 17 star systems. The coverage was, predictably, ridiculous. This is impossible, he muttered. In a stunning display of what experts are calling human tactical doctrine, maintenance worker Marcus Riley single-handedly defeated the notorious Dread Fleet using what witnesses describe as weaponized customer service and strategic playlist management. The anchor reported with the kind of breathless excitement usually reserved for sporting events or natural disasters. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, Jake replied. I haven't even turned on the vacuum cleaner. The bridge of the stellar dominance had taken on the atmosphere of a disaster movie, specifically the part where everyone realizes the disaster is much worse than they initially thought and also probably unstoppable. Warning lights flashed in colors that the draconian language had 17 different words for, each describing a different shade of impending doom. The experts, of course, had no idea what they were talking about. Marcus hadn't used any tactical doctrine, he'd just made things up as he went along, using his knowledge of the ship, and a healthy dose of spite. But the galactic military didn't know that, and suddenly every alien defense force wanted to study human warfare techniques. Damage report. Admiral Vextar barked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Tell me again about the gravity wells, demanded General Thork, a massive saurian who'd flown halfway across the galaxy to interview Marcus. Was this a standard human military strategy? Lieutenant Kresh Tar consulted his tactical display with the expression of someone reading his own obituary. We've lost 47 ships to the gravity anomaly, another 38 to the cleaning drones, and 15 more to what the humans are calling their sprinkler system. The remaining ships are reporting various degrees of damage ranging from significant to please send help. Not exactly, Marcus replied, trying not to laugh. I just thought it would be funny to watch cyborgs try to walk through invisible molasses. And we haven't fired a single shot, Vextar said, more to himself than to his crew. The general made careful notes, apparently convinced that invisible molasses was some kind of advanced tactical concept. Actually, sir, we did fire several shots, but they seem to have been absorbed by some kind of defensive field around the station. Back on the stellar paradise, things had changed dramatically. Captain Vortak, who had once treated Marcus like an inconvenient pest, now consulted him on every major decision. Jake's voice crackled over the communication system, still maintaining that infuriatingly casual tone. Hey, Mr. Vextar, you still there? I wanted to let you know that I'm about to start the vacuum cleaner, so you might want to move your bigger ships back a bit. This thing has some serious suction. Marcus, the captain said, his voice carrying a respect that would have been unthinkable a month ago. The Centaurian delegation is requesting enhanced security measures for their upcoming summit. What would you recommend? Marcus considered the question seriously. Well, Captain, I'd suggest making sure they understand that the person most likely to save their lives in an emergency is the one they're least likely to notice. Might want to be nice to the maintenance staff, just in case. What? Vextar asked with the careful pronunciation of someone whose sanity was hanging by a very thin thread. Exactly is your vacuum cleaner? Oh, it's pretty standard maintenance equipment. Keeps the station clean by removing unwanted debris from the surrounding area. The effective range is only about 50,000 kilometers, so you should be fine if you back up a little. Vorthak nodded gravely, missing the irony completely. Chief Grimnar had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. The Chidanoid who had once threatened to use Marcus as insect food now deferred to him on all security matters. 50,000 kilometers was approximately the distance his entire fleet was currently spread across. Admiral, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting a massive energy buildup from the station. Power levels are off the charts. I have been thinking, Grimnar said during one of their planning sessions, perhaps we should recruit more humans for security positions. Your species has a unique approach to problem solving. All ships, retreat to a safe distance immediately. Vextar ordered, but even as he said it, he realized he had no idea what constituted a safe distance from a space station that apparently used black holes for garbage disposal. We call it making stuff up and hoping it works, Marcus replied. But sure, that sounds like a fancy tactical doctrine. The real change, though, was in how the other species saw humanity. Word of Marcus's victory had spread throughout the galaxy, and suddenly humans were being viewed not as weak maintenance workers, but as potential security threats of the most unpredictable kind. The retreat was not what anyone would call orderly. Ships that had spent years training in perfect formation maneuvers suddenly found themselves fleeing from a collection of prefabricated modules like startled fish escaping a shark. The mighty draconian fleet, which had struck fear into the hearts of countless civilizations, was running away from one human and his household appliances. They're dangerous because they're underestimated, one xenobiologist explained in a research paper that Marcus found hilarious. Human tactical thinking operates on principles that more advanced species cannot predict or counter. They weaponize the mundane and transform service systems into military assets. But this is insane. Vextar shouted into the communication channel. What are you? What kind of research station is this? Jake's response carried a note of what might have been amusement. Research station? Oh, that's funny. Who told you this was a research station? The paper went on to recommend that all interstellar vessels employing human staff should be considered potentially hostile in any conflict scenario. Marcus's favorite response came from the Hegemony itself. Their official statement, released through diplomatic channels, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic terror. The hegemony acknowledges that human containment protocols may require significant revision. Further purification efforts are postponed pending tactical assessment. Our own databases. Galactic shipping records. This facility is listed as Human Research Outpost Echo 7, dedicated to xenogeological studies and deep space observation. Translation: they were too scared to try again. Yeah, about that, Jake said. And for the first time, his voice carried a hint of something that wasn't casual friendliness. That's what we call a cover story, Mr. Vextar. This isn't a research station. Marcus had been offered a dozen different positions: security chief, tactical consultant, military advisor, but he'd turned them all down for something that suited him better. Chief of ship security for the Stellar Paradise, with one important caveat. He kept his maintenance tools. The vacuum cleaner activated with a sound like reality being turned inside out. 3 of Vextar's heavy cruisers, despite being at what should have been a safe distance, suddenly found themselves being pulled inexorably toward the station. Just in case, he explained to anyone who asked, "What is it then?" Vextar demanded, watching his ship struggle against forces that made no sense according to any known physics. The final scene that would become legendary happened during the ship's next cruise, when a group of draconian tourists started complaining about the inferior human staff. Marcus, overhearing the conversation while fixing a nearby recycling unit, stood up and smiled. "Well, I suppose there's no point in keeping it secret anymore. This is testing facility Echo 7, and I'm not really a maintenance guy. I mean, I do maintain things, but that's not my primary job. Gentlemen," he said politely, "I'm Marcus Riley, Chief of Ship Security. I also happen to be the human who defeated the Dread Fleet using a sonic screwdriver and creative thinking. Would you like to continue that conversation, or would you prefer to enjoy your cruise in peace?" One of the cruisers managed to break free from the vacuum's pull, but not before losing its outer hull plating, which was now presumably taking up residence in whatever passed for the station's dust collection system. "My name is Jake Murphy, and I'm a senior defense systems engineer for the Earth Colonial Engineering Corps. I designed most of the systems you've been dealing with today." The Draconians, who had heard the stories, immediately found somewhere else to be. Word of that encounter spread quickly through human communities across the galaxy. Suddenly, maintenance workers and service staff were being treated with a new kind of nervous respect. Nobody wanted to discover that their janitor was the next Marcus Riley. "You're a weapons designer?" The best part was the recruitment ads that started appearing on human colonies, seeking maintenance personnel for luxury cruise positions. No experience necessary. Willingness to get creative under pressure preferred. References from defeated pirate fleets a plus. Weapons? That's kind of harsh. I prefer to think of them as extremely aggressive household appliances. The garbage disposal that creates micro black holes, the pest control drones with monomolecular cutting edges, the sprinkler system that fires superheated plasma, the vacuum cleaner that generates localized space-time distortions. All perfectly normal maintenance equipment, if you happen to be maintaining a facility that occasionally needs to defend itself against hostile alien fleets. Admiral Vextar felt something that might have been respect, if respect could be mixed with terror and a growing understanding that his military career was probably over. Marcus kept one of those ads framed in his new office, right next to his maintenance certificate, and a photo of Captain Scar being loaded onto a prison transport. His cybernetic system still playing dial-up sounds. "How many of these facilities does your species have?" Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the best weapon really was being exactly what nobody expected. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity not because humans were strong or fast or technically advanced, but because they were resourceful, unpredictable, and absolutely terrifying when underestimated. And if that wasn't worth a little respect, Marcus didn't know what was. Jake was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was definitely amusement in his voice. "Well, that would be telling, wouldn't it? Let's just say that when humanity decided to expand into the galaxy, we thought it might be wise to have a few contingency plans scattered around. You know, just in case we ran into unfriendly neighbors." The maintenance manual on his desk, worn from years of use, carried a new inscription courtesy of the Galactic Defense Force, approved tactical reference material. Handle with extreme caution. You're telling me that Earth has hidden weapons platforms disguised as research stations throughout the galaxy? I'm not telling you anything, Mr. Vextar. I'm just a maintenance guy who happens to be very good at fixing things. And right now, what needs fixing is the relationship between your fleet and the structural integrity of your ships. Marcus smiled every time he read it. After all, who would have thought that the secret to galactic domination was hidden in the troubleshooting section? As if to emphasize the point, the vacuum cleaner powered down, releasing the remaining cruisers to limp away with whatever dignity they had left. I'm going to make you an offer, Jake continued. You and your fleet can turn around and head back to wherever you came from, and we'll call this whole thing a training exercise. No harm, no foul, no need to mention to your superiors that you got your tail kicked by a human janitor. Vextar looked around his damaged bridge, counted the ships he'd lost to household appliances, and came to a decision that would probably save his career, if not his life. All ships, prepare for immediate departure. Set course for home base, maximum speed. Wise choice, Admiral, Jake said. And hey, if you're ever in the neighborhood again, feel free to stop by. I'll make sure to have the coffee ready. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had convened with the kind of urgency usually reserved for situations involving exploding stars or tax audits. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from across the galaxy tried to process the reports they'd received from Admiral Vextar's fleet. Chancellor Blorth floated at his podium, looking like someone who had just discovered that his insurance policy didn't cover acts of human stupidity. The holographic display showed what remained of the draconian armada limping back toward their home territory, roughly half the size it had been when it left. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings. Blorth began, his voice carrying all the authority of someone who was desperately trying to maintain control of a situation that had already spiraled completely out of hand. We have received Admiral Vextar's preliminary report on the human situation. A collective murmur ran through the assembly, the kind of sound that large groups make when they're all thinking the same thing but nobody wants to be the first to say it out loud. According to the Admiral's report, Blorth continued, consulting a datapad that looked like it had been handled by someone with very sweaty palms. The human facility in question was not, in fact, a simple research station. Ambassador Trillpack, whose flower-like appearance was currently wilted with stress, raised what might have been a hand. Chancellor, the report mentions something about garbage disposals that create black holes. Surely that's some kind of translation error? Blorth's eyes rotated in what was becoming a familiar expression of barely contained panic. I'm afraid not, Ambassador. Our linguists have triple-checked the translation matrix. The humans appear to have disguised military-grade weapons as household appliances. The insectoid delegation began chittering among themselves in what sounded like the insect equivalent of nervous laughter. One of them, whose name was unpronounceable in most languages and sounded like someone dropping cutlery down a flight of stairs, spoke up. Chancellor, are we to understand? The insectoid delegate continued, his mandibles clicking nervously, that this single human defeated our most advanced battle fleet using what our intelligence reports describe as stuff he had lying around the house? The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that occurs when an entire galactic government collectively realizes they might need to update their resumes. Chancellor Blorth cleared what might have been his throat, though with his species it was hard to tell. The situation is complex. Admiral Vextar's report indicates that the human in question. He consulted his datapad again. One Jake Morrison appears to be completely unaware that he possesses what can only be described as a fortress of mass destruction disguised as a modest living space. Unaware? Ambassador Trillpack's petals had now fully closed, which in her species indicated either deep meditation or the early stages of a nervous breakdown. How can someone be unaware they own weapons capable of disabling dreadnoughts? According to our intelligence, Blorth said, his voice taking on the tone of someone who was beginning to question the very nature of reality. Mr. Morrison appears to believe he simply has really good appliances. Our xenobiologists theorize that humans may have evolved some kind of unconscious ability to weaponize their domestic environment as a survival mechanism. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jake Morrison was blissfully unaware that he had just become the most feared individual in the known galaxy. He was sitting at his kitchen table, enjoying what he considered to be a perfectly normal Tuesday morning coffee and reading the news on his tablet. Ha, he said to himself, scrolling through the headlines, Another one of those weird meteor shower reports. Third one this month. You'd think NASA would have better tracking systems by now. He took another sip of his coffee brewed by a machine that 3 different galactic civilizations now classified as a Class VI reality manipulation device and glanced out his window. In the distance, he could see what looked like a small aircraft circling his neighborhood, though it seemed to be keeping a respectful distance. Probably just some traffic helicopter. Jake mused, completely failing to notice that the helicopter was actually a Galactic Council reconnaissance probe, piloted by the bravest, or most expendable, volunteer they could find, whose job was to monitor Jake's activities from what they hoped was a safe distance. The probe pilot, a nervous Centaurian named Ziploc, was currently sending real-time reports back to the Council. Target appears to be consuming a dark liquid from a ceramic vessel, Ziploc reported, his voice tight with tension. Unknown if this is some kind of ritual preparation for combat. Back in the Galactic Assembly, the mood was growing increasingly grim. Representative Glubb, nor of the Aquatic Federation, whose species communicated primarily through bioluminescent patterns, was flashing what roughly translated to "We are all going to die horribly." "The question before us," Chancellor Blorth said, trying to project an air of calm leadership while internally screaming, "is how we proceed. Do we attempt diplomatic contact? Do we evacuate this entire sector of space? Do we pretend this never happened and hope the human doesn't notice us?" The last option was gaining surprising support among the Assembly. "If I may," came a voice from the back of the hall. It belonged to Professor Quill Met, the galaxy's leading expert on primitive civilizations, who looked like he hadn't slept in several cycles. "I've been analyzing the humans' behavioral patterns from our surveillance data. I believe we may be approaching this situation entirely wrong." The Assembly turned to look at him with the kind of desperate hope usually reserved for people lost in the desert who think they've spotted an oasis. "Continue," Professor Blorth said. "From what I can observe, this human Jake Morrison appears to operate under what I can only describe as benign ignorance. He genuinely believes his environment is normal. More importantly, he seems to have no aggressive intentions whatsoever. His primary concerns appear to be maintaining his living space, consuming caffeine, and something called Netflix." "Netflix?" Ambassador Trilpak asked, her petals cautiously beginning to open. "Some form of entertainment distribution system. The point is, as long as we don't threaten him or his property, he appears to pose no danger to anyone." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the Assembly, followed immediately by a wave of renewed panic, as someone asked the obvious follow-up question. "But what if someone does threaten him?" The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several delegates quietly beginning to draft evacuation plans for their home systems. Back on Earth, Jake finished his coffee and stood up, stretching. He had a pretty normal day planned: some lighthouse work, maybe finally fix that squeaky door hinge, perhaps reorganize his garage. The Galactic Council, had they known about these plans, would have immediately issued a galaxy-wide state of emergency. Fortunately for everyone's peace of mind, they didn't. At least not yet.